I never believed the old stories about the man-eating spirit from the northern regions. To me, the Wendigo was nothing more than part of ancient mythology, a legend born from humanity's fear of long winters. But my refusal to believe in things like that would become the biggest irony of my life. Because the night this all began, that myth felt closer than my own breath. I was driving back from a small documentary project in a remote town called North Pine, right at the edge of a forest that stretched further than the eye could follow. Winter had just peaked. The roads were empty, as if the world had dimmed most of its life. Only the sound of snow crushed beneath my tires accompanied me, and sometimes, when I turned off the radio, I could hear something else. Something faintly resembling a whisper. At first, I thought it was just the wind. I forced myself not to stop even as visibility worsened with the falling snow. But when the dashboard clock hit 11:47 p.m., my car trembled strangely and slowly lost speed. The indicator lights flickered before everything suddenly died. The engine shut down like something was choking it from the inside. "Seriously?" I muttered, tapping the steering wheel. No signal on my phone, no other cars passing, no houses for several kilometers. The forest on both sides of the road looked like a black wall closing in. After minutes of trying to restart the car without success, I finally decided to step out and check the hood. The instant I opened the door, the cold wind stabbed my skin like giant needles. The night was too quiet. Quiet in a way that didn't feel normal, not even for a place this isolated. When I stood beside the car, the snow beneath my feet barely made a sound. The air felt frozen, almost as if it was watching me. As soon as I lifted the car's hood, something strange greeted me. Not a smoking engine, not a broken part, but marks, right on top of the hood and down the side of the car. Long marks, like scratches left by claws or fingers, not neat, not symmetrical, but clearly from something that moved by crawling. I swallowed hard. Not a bear, I thought. The marks were too long, too much like hands. I hugged myself and tried to steady my breathing. Maybe it was just a fallen branch or something from the trees. Maybe. But only seconds after I closed the hood, I heard it again. That sound I'd assumed was the wind, but now it was clearer, closer. A voice that sounded like someone calling. "Hey!" I froze. Snow drifted softly. The forest didn't move. Even the wind had stopped. Then the voice came again, a little louder. "Hey! Help!" I stood still. I should have run back into the car. I should have shut the door and waited for morning. But something in that voice pulled me in. There was a desperate tone to it, as if someone was dying inside the forest. I grabbed my flashlight from the trunk and turned toward the dark trees. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice unsteady. No answer. I pointed the flashlight between the tight columns of trees. The beam only cut through a few meters before drowning in pitch-black darkness. There was nothing there. I almost turned away, until the voice whispered again, this time so close it felt as if it was spoken directly beside my ear. "Cold. Help!" I jerked back. The flashlight almost slipped from my hand. My breath came out in long white fog, as if my lungs were freezing. The voice didn't sound like an ordinary human. There was a faint echo to it, like it came from somewhere it wasn't supposed to. Heart pounding, I aimed the flashlight toward the direction of the voice. And I saw it. Behind the trees, about 15 meters away, stood something I first mistook for a person. It was far too thin, far too tall. Its skin was pale gray, sharp against the black forest behind it. Long, tangled hair clung to a face that seemed stretched, as if the skull beneath was forcing the skin to pull tight. Those black eyes stared at me without blinking. My stomach churned. Who are you?" I managed, stepping back. The figure didn't move, but its mouth slowly opened, revealing teeth, too many teeth for any human, sharp and dark. When it spoke, the sound didn't come from its throat. It sounded like mimicking, copying, borrowing someone's voice. "Cold, help." But now the voice no longer resembled a whisper. Now it sounded like the voice of a small child. I stumbled back in panic. The flashlight trembled in my grip. I remembered too many stories the locals told me, too many warnings I ignored, about the Wendigo that could imitate human voices to lure victims, about a creature endlessly hungry, about a spirit that filled the bodies of those lost in the cold. No, it was impossible. It was a legend. Just a legend. But the creature moved. Not walking, not stepping. It crawled toward me with movements that were wrong, jerky, broken motions as if its joints weren't attached correctly. Each movement came with a cracking sound, like bones grinding. I screamed and ran back to the car. I didn't care about the cold stabbing my skin. I didn't care about slipping on the snow. My mind focused solely on reaching the car and locking the door. The moment I slammed the door shut, the whole car shook violently, as if something struck the rear end. I held my breath. Silence. Seconds passed like minutes, but before my grip on the steering wheel loosened, something tapped lightly on the side window. Tap, tap, tap. I turned my head slowly, and on the fogged glass, I saw its face. Too close, too inhuman. Its mouth stretched long, skin clinging to the edges of the lips. Its black eyes reflected my flashlight's glow in a way no human eyes ever would. The creature pressed its lips against the glass, as if trying to smile. Then, in a voice identical to my father's, the voice I hadn't heard in 4 years, the creature said, "Hey, open the door." The world stopped, and that night became the beginning of something far worse than a winter legend. I kept replaying last night's incident in my mind as I sat inside the cabin that morning. My hands were still trembling, though the temperature wasn't even that cold. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was something else, something that had crawled into my skin and stayed there, whispering that what I saw wasn't a mistake. But the more I tried to convince myself it was only an animal, the more my brain rejected the idea. That thing had stood upright. It had looked at me, and when I remembered its eyes, my stomach twisted again. Deep, black, like holes that didn't reflect light, only swallowed it whole. The day felt unusually silent. No wind, no cracking branches, no faint howl from wolves in the valley. Nothing. As if the woods were holding their breath. I tried distracting myself by boiling water for instant coffee, but even the sound of the kettle made me jump. My nerves were a mess. I opened the cabin window just a little to let some air in, and that's when I noticed something that made every thought in my head freeze. Footprints. Huge, elongated footprints in the thin patches of snow near the trees. And they weren't there yesterday. I stared at them for a long moment, unable to blink. They looked almost human, but not quite. Too long, too twisted. The steps were uneven, like something walked wrong, but on purpose. I felt watched. Even before I moved my eyes toward the line of trees, I felt it. That crawling sensation again, the one that made the hairs on the back of my neck rise like needles. I slowly turned my head toward the forest. Nothing. Just the same stillness that felt too deliberate, too heavy. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something, was hiding behind the trees. I shut the window, maybe a bit too fast. The cabin walls felt smaller. The silence felt tighter. I needed to get out. Not to run, but to reassure myself that I wasn't losing my mind. Maybe the footprints belonged to a deer or moose, distorted by melting snow. Maybe the thing I saw last night was only a shadow. Maybe fear was messing with me. The excuses sounded good, until I opened the cabin door. The forest greeted me with cold, sharp air that cut straight to the lungs. The footprints were clearer from here, and panic cracked through me like lightning. The prints started from the tree line, but the direction was wrong. They weren't moving away from the cabin. They were moving toward it, and the last print stopped only a meter away from where I stood last night. My heart pounded painfully. I crouched down to inspect one of the prints, and the shape became even more disturbing. It was human-like, yes, but stretched, almost clawed at the tips. No shoe patterns, no fur. Just deep impressions as if the creature carried an impossibly heavy body on narrow, bony feet. I didn't hear anything, not wind, not animals, until the forest floor behind me crunched. Just one step. Dry leaves, snapped twig, slow, intentional. I froze. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. The sound didn't repeat, but I knew it wasn't my imagination. Something had shifted inside the woods. I didn't dare turn around. Every instinct screamed, "Do not look, do not run, do not make a sound." I stood there, staring at the footprints, feeling the weight of unseen eyes pressing against my spine. 5 seconds passed, 10, maybe 30, I couldn't tell. Finally, when I managed to inhale, I whispered, barely audible, "Hello." No answer. Just the wind finally returning as if it had been waiting for me to speak. I slowly turned my head toward the trees, expecting something horrible. Antlers, white eyes, a gaunt silhouette. But again, nothing. Only the forest silently judging me. I went back inside the cabin, closing the door carefully this time. My hands were shaking again, but it wasn't fear in the usual sense. It was dread. The kind of dread that feels personal. The kind that tells you, it knows where you sleep. That night came faster than I wanted. Clouds covered the moon, smothering the forest in thick darkness. No lamp, no fireplace, no phone signal, only the dim yellow of a small battery lantern I placed on the table. Every sound felt magnified. Every creak in the wood felt wrong. Every shadow felt like it was breathing. I tried reading to distract myself, but my eyes kept drifting to the window. At one point, I thought I saw movement near the tree line. Something tall, something shifting between the branches with unnatural grace, like bones bending in directions they shouldn't. But when I blinked, it was gone. Later, maybe hours later, I heard it. A voice. A whisper. Not outside. Near the window. It wasn't speaking a language I understood. It sounded like breath scraping through a throat too dry to function. A low, rasping murmur. Almost curious. Almost hungry. My heartbeat drowned out everything else. Then I heard soft tapping. On the glass. 1, 2, 3 slow taps. Like fingertips. I shut my eyes tightly and sat perfectly still, gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles hurt. The tapping stopped for several seconds, but the presence didn't leave. I could feel it there, just beyond the thin layer of glass and wooden walls, watching, waiting. The Wendigo, whatever it truly was, had found me. And now it wasn't just observing, it was getting closer, bolder, more curious, and deep inside, beneath all the fear, a single truth settled in my bones. This wasn't random. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a creature wandering by. It came for me, and it wasn't going to stop. The night wind lashed against my face like a whip, piercing my skin until it burned. Every step I took on the snowy road made a small crunching sound that echoed loudly in the silence. I wasn't sure how far I had run, but my lungs felt like they were being carved open. It felt like I couldn't stop, but my body forced me to. My legs buckled, and I finally collapsed at the edge of the road, clutching my knees while trying not to panic. My breath came in harsh bursts, forming white clouds that immediately vanished in the cold wind. The world felt as if it was shrinking, filled only with cold, darkness, and a fear that stabbed down my spine. I tried to steady myself. One thing I had learned tonight: the Wendigo wasn't just folklore. It wasn't a story told to scare children. This creature was real. Completely real. And worse, it had chosen me as its prey. I sucked in a deep breath, trying to focus. North Pine, still about 3 kilometers. I have to keep moving. But as I was about to stand up, I heard something. Crack. The sound of a twig snapping from the forest on the left side of the road. It was small, very small, like something intentionally moving slowly. I turned quickly, aiming my phone flashlight, now only at 6% battery, towards the dark trees. The dim beam cut through the black silhouettes, but nothing was there. "Don't imagine things. Maybe it's just an animal," I muttered, though I didn't believe it myself. I stood back up and kept walking, but the uneasy feeling clung to the back of my neck like an invisible hand pressing down. Every few meters I turned my head, making sure I wasn't being followed, but there was nothing behind me except my own footprints and the creature's prints I had seen back in Chapter 2, those long, deep tracks. They were still there, but now there were more of them. I swallowed hard. This is getting worse. I picked up my pace. The air grew colder, piercing straight into my bones. Snow drifted slowly like ash falling from a dark sky. The road ahead was empty, glowing faintly under the moonlight reflecting off uneven snow. Then I began to hear another sound. Footsteps. Soft. Distant. Steady. Like something trying to match my pace. I stopped. The footsteps stopped too. My heart pounded so loud I thought someone miles away could hear it. I swallowed, held my breath, and, terrified, tried a small experiment. I took one step forward. Crunch. Half a second later, I heard a responding step. Crunch. Exactly the same as mine. I couldn't panic, not yet, but my body reacted before logic did. I started walking faster. The steps behind me matched. I ran. The footsteps also ran. But the sound wasn't human. It was heavier, deeper, like massive feet being driven into the ground with absurd force. I turned around. Empty. Nothing on the road, but from between the trees, something moved. At first it was faint. Then its silhouette emerged, tall and thin,
moving in a way that made no sense, as though its bones were not where bones should be. The creature crawled on 4 limbs, then 2, then 3, moving as if gravity didn't apply to it. Panic exploded inside me. Run! 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 I forced myself to sprint, even though my legs felt like they would snap. The flashlight trembled in my hand as if panicking alongside me. And beneath the pounding of my heartbeat and my ragged breaths, I heard the voice again. Hey. This time, it sounded closer, clearer, more perfect, as if someone was whispering right beside my ear. The voice was no longer a rough imitation like before. It was refined, almost identical to mine. I'm getting closer. I nearly tripped when I heard that, not because of the words, but because of the tone. It was my voice, when I was scared, when I panicked, when I screamed inside the car begging for help. The creature was copying me, exactly. My pace slowed from exhaustion, but I forced my body to keep going. I couldn't stop, not tonight, not until I reached North Pine. But the road began to change. The trees grew denser on both sides, forming 2 dark walls that narrowed in. And at the end of the road, something was standing there. Huge, thin, upright, like a corpse forced back to life. I froze, nearly collapsing backward. My flashlight shook in my hand. I pointed the beam towards the creature, though part of me refused to see it. It was tall, at least twice the height of a human. Its skin was pale, like rotting wood covered in frost. Ribs protruded out as if barely covered by flesh. Dark antlers curled from its skull like those of a dead deer. And its face? No lips, only long, sharp teeth exposed to the cold. Its sunken eyes reflected a faint glimmer from my flashlight. It stood still, unmoving, but its body vibrated slightly, like a malfunctioning machine. Then it spoke, using my voice. Don't run. The world froze. My breath stopped. For a moment, I couldn't even feel my own body. Then the creature moved. Not attacking, not roaring. The creature mimicked a human trying to smile. A wrong smile. A broken smile. A smile from something that didn't understand what a smile should be. My body reacted on its own. I screamed. I turned around, and I ran into the forest. Better lost in the woods than face that. Branches whipped my face and shoulders as I plunged deeper into the trees. The snowy ground caused me to slip several times, but I got back up. I didn't stop. My world was reduced to running and fear. Behind me, from the road, the footsteps returned. Not one, not 2, but many. As if more than one creature was now there. Then the voices followed, louder, clearer, closer. I see you. I'm hungry. Hey! I didn't know how I could still run. I didn't know when my tears started falling. But eventually, after what felt like endless minutes, I saw a faint light ahead. A small light. A human light. I sprinted towards it with the last strength I had, and when I burst out of the forest, I saw a large wooden sign covered in snow. North Pine, 1 kilometer. Relief almost washed over me until I heard the sound behind me. Soft, heavy, and like cracking wood. The creature had stepped out of the forest exactly where I had escaped. And now, It was standing still, watching me. The night was far from over.
I didn't return to the cabin immediately after the last snap of a broken twig faded. In the darkness that hung like a wet curtain between the trees, I felt as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting for my next move. The air grew colder. My palms were even numb as I squeezed the flashlight until the plastic creaked. I tried to regain my ragged breath, but the sound of my own heartbeat felt like drums hammered too hard inside my chest. I looked again toward the trees, toward the place where I saw that shadow standing. Wendigo. That word kept spinning in my mind like a whisper that refused to stay quiet. I wasn't sure how long I stood still before my feet finally forced me to move. Every step felt like the wrong decision. I wanted to run as fast as possible, but my body refused. There was a sensation of being watched, so sharp it made the back of my neck stiff. When I reached the cabin, I realized something. The door was slightly open. "I locked that," I whispered. I stopped a few meters from the doorway, trying to confirm whether I had simply misremembered or something had actually entered. My flashlight trembled as I aimed it at the dark gap, but all I saw was the simple living room, an old couch, a small table, and a wooden shelf where I kept my camera and notebook. Slowly, I pushed the door. Its hinges groaned softly. The sound broke the silence in a way that made my skin crawl. Once I stepped inside, the air in the cabin felt much colder than outside. My flashlight swept across the walls, floor, and couch. Everything seemed the same, until I saw the table. My notebook was no longer open to the page where I had left it. The page had been turned, and there on the paper full of my research notes was a handprint, large and long, dark brownish, like dirt or dried blood. I froze for a few seconds before rushing to close the door and lock it twice. My breath quickened as I checked the entire room. No other traces, no sign of anything hiding, but the handprint alone was enough to raise every hair on my body. I sat on the floor, my back against the wall. I tried to think clearly. That forest definitely had something in it, and the Wendigo wasn't just a legend abandoned by old tribes. It was something that truly existed, something that moved among the dark trees out there. I reopened the notebook and stared at the page again. Under the smudged handprint, there was a small note I had never written, thin writing, as if scratched with a claw. "You heard it. You saw it. You're next." My hands instantly felt cold. That writing? Impossible. It was impossible that this was done by an ordinary human. Impossible that someone entered without me hearing. And impossible that someone knew what I saw in the forest. I closed the notebook and stood while fighting the trembling. I thought the only way to ensure my safety was to stay in the cabin until sunrise, but that was only a theory. This forest, it seemed to have its own rules, its own world, and that creature seemed to be a part of its darkness. I wedged a plank against the door and lowered all the window curtains. I placed the flashlight on the table while lighting the small stove to gain some warmth. As the fire began to burn, I sat in the chair, hugging myself. Outside, the wind moved again. The sound was like layered whispers, and each layer circled the cabin, searching for a gap. I covered my ears, but the voices grew clearer, as if calling my name. ... Andre. I froze. I knew exactly what I heard. It sounded like a human voice, weak, almost desperate, but there was a rough, drawn-out tone that wasn't natural, like it was trying to imitate human speech. I didn't move, didn't breathe. ... Andre, open the door. My whole body went hot and cold. The creature was outside. It had to be him. I slowly stood, moving away from the window, but my steps were clumsy. The wooden floor creaked loudly beneath me. The voice stopped. A crushing silence wrapped around the cabin like a blanket of death. Then something happened. Thud. A heavy blow struck the cabin wall. I jolted. Thud. This time louder. Dust fell from the ceiling. I grabbed the flashlight and pointed it at the wall. Through the thin layer of wood, I saw a large shadow, very large, long and skinny. Its antlers brushed the top of the window frame. Then the raspy voice returned, but this time closer, clearer, hungrier. Hungry. No more doubt. The creature knew I was alone, and it was laughing at my fear. I reached for my phone with trembling hands. No signal. 0 bars, no network at all since I entered this forest 2 days ago. But I tried turning it on several times, though I knew it was useless. Suddenly, the entire cabin shook. Something scraped against the wall, long and slow, like sharp claws dragging along wood. Creak, creak, creak. I backed away, but my foot caught the chair leg and I fell to the floor. My flashlight shone at the door, just as the shadow of the creature passed the window. "Oh God," I whispered. I crawled to the kitchen where the only object that resembled a weapon was a long kitchen knife. Not much, but at least it made me feel a little braver. The scraping stopped. Silence. I held my breath. Then, knock, knock, knock. The door was knocked on. This time, the voice that came wasn't a terrifying whisper. It sounded like human. A man's voice. Adult. Normal. "Hello? Is anyone there? I'm lost," he called. My heart twisted strangely. Half of me wanted to open the door. Half wanted to run as far as I could. "Who?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "I'm a hiker. Please open the door." I exhaled sharply. A human? At this hour? Impossible. No one hikes when the temperature drops nearly below 0. I pressed my ear to the door. The breathing sounded strange, too heavy, too slow. Then he spoke again, but this time the words were broken, like someone trying to imitate human speech. The tone and stress were wrong, too studied. "I am a hiker." Every part of my body froze. That wasn't a human. It was him, the Wendigo imitating a human voice to lure me out. I stepped back slowly, gripping the knife tightly. From behind the door came a long breath. Hot, hungry. Then the voice changed, becoming low, cracked, and inhuman. Hungry. I trembled violently. The creature stood right outside, waiting, watching, searching for a way into the cabin through any gap in the wood. And the night was still very long. I don't know how long I just stood still, holding the knife with hands that were trembling so badly, red rashes appeared on my skin. My breath felt like swallowing shards of ice, sharp, shallow, and painful. Outside, those heavy footsteps were still heard from time to time, sometimes close, sometimes drifting away, only to return again. Like something intentionally circling the cabin, like a predator that knows its prey is locked inside and it only needs to wait for the right moment to strike. I tried to shut out every bad thought, but the more I pushed them away, the more the sounds pierced through the cracks in the wooden boards. Creak. The scratching came again, sliding from beneath the window to the side of the door, slow, long, as if the creature was measuring the wall. I backed away from the door, choosing to sit in the darkest corner of the room. I turned off the flashlight to save the battery, because I didn't know how long I would have to survive here. If the power went out, at least I still had one last source of light. Silence returned. No footsteps, no heavy breaths, but I knew it wasn't gone. I closed my eyes, trying to think clearly. Tomorrow morning, when the sun rises, I have to leave. I have to get out of this forest. But the sentence sounded like a distant dream, as if tomorrow was something that was never guaranteed to come. I hugged my knees, trying to stop the shaking in my legs. And just when I began to feel a little calmer, the sound came again. This time from the cabin roof. Thump,
The sound made me stand up instantly. The roof wasn't strong, only thin wood weakened in several spots. I looked up. The snow outside was thick, but the dark shadow moving slowly across the roof's surface couldn't be mistaken. Something was up there. Heavy. Very heavy. The roof creaked. Tiny splinters of wood rained down like dust. I covered my mouth, holding myself from making even the smallest sound. If the creature knew I was right beneath it... Crack! A section of the roof bowed inward, right in front of me. I stepped back quickly, bumping into a small table and knocking a glass off it. And that, apparently, was enough to catch its attention. The footsteps on the roof stopped. Then, the breathing began. Very close. Too close. The exit. I had to get to the exit. Even if it meant running into the darkness, that was better than waiting for the roof to collapse and the creature to drop straight onto my head. I grabbed my jacket and small bag. No time for gloves. I rushed toward the door. But before I could unlock it, bam! The door shook violently from the outside. Once, twice, 5 times in a row. I stumbled backwards. The creature was trying to break in, and from the way the door shuttered, only a few more hits would break the wood apart. I panicked. My eyes searched for anything to block the door. A chair, a small cabinet. I shoved everything I could find against it, stacking a makeshift barricade. Bam! The door slammed again. The chair slid. The wood cracked a little. I backed away. The creature was almost inside. The next seconds passed like a nightmare, too real to deny. I heard the crack widening in the door until finally a voice came through. A familiar voice. But this time, softer, more convincing. "Andre, please open. I'm cold." It was my mother's voice. A voice I hadn't heard in 2 years. The voice I knew better than anything else in my entire life. My breath caught. No, that's impossible. The voice whimpered softly. "Open the door, son. It's Mama." Tears streamed down my face, not because I believed it, but because of the pain. I knew it wasn't my mother. It couldn't be. I had buried her with my own hands. But the creature knew what hurt me most, what could break me the easiest. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. "Stop," I whispered. "Stop using that voice." The voice shifted again, drastically, becoming hoarse. High. Wrong.
Open. The door shook violently. The barricade slid a few centimeters. Time was nearly up. I looked behind me. The only way out was the kitchen window. Small, but I could squeeze through if I forced myself. I ran to it, carefully unlocked it, and pushed the glass up. Cold air stabbed my face immediately. Behind me, the barricade shifted again. The wood of the door began to split. I had no time. I climbed onto the window frame, forcing my body through, one leg out, the other following. But just as I was about to leap into the snow, I heard the voice. Not from the door, not from the roof, but from behind the cabin where the kitchen window faced. Bendray. I turned instantly. Between 2 dark trees, only a few meters from where I was climbing out, it stood. Tall, thin, its antlers brushing against the branches, its eyes hollow. It leaned slightly, tilting its head as if curious about how I planned to escape. Then, it raised its long hand and mimicked the gesture of someone waving. Slowly, very slowly, a small, unnatural smile stretched across its too long jaw. I didn't have time to think. I ran with everything I had toward the other side of the forest, away from the cabin, away from its silhouette. The snow struck my face like stones. My breath felt torn from the inside, but I kept running. I couldn't stop, even though my legs felt numb. I didn't know where I was going. I just followed whatever path took me farthest from that voice. Only after several minutes, or hours, I wasn't sure, I finally saw a faint light in the distance. A street lamp. A road. I gasped for air as I stumbled out of the forest's edge, and as I collapsed to my knees on the asphalt, a pickup truck drove by and screeched to a stop. A man climbed out. "Oh my God, are you okay? What happened?" he asked. I wanted to explain. I wanted to speak, but my voice was gone. All I could do was point toward the forest, my hand shaking uncontrollably while tears streamed down my face. The man looked toward the forest. There was nothing, no shadows, no creature. But I knew, beyond that darkness, beyond the tree line, the creature was still there, still watching me, still following me. And that night, I realized something. Some things don't stop just because you escape. Some things will keep searching until they find you again.